Thank you for joining me for the AP Language Exam Review sessions. We are now going to review the 6-point analytic rubric that is being used for the first time this year by the College Board for the AP Language Exam. I feel like this rubric gives students a lot more opportunities to earn points than in the previous rubric with 9 points. There are 3 rows, the first row being points awarded for a thesis statement, row 2 being points awarded for evidence and commentary, and row 3 being points awarded for sophistication. So let's take each row piece by piece and kind of understand what each row is asking of you. So we're going to look at the maximum points that are being awarded in row A. So to earn the 1 point for your thesis, the writer has to respond to the prompt with a defensible thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices. So in this sense, the writer has to create a clear thesis statement that's easy to find by the reader. It should be explicit and not implied. What I mean by that is that in years past, if you hinted at a thesis and didn't outrightly have 1 or 2 sentences that expressly said what your argument was in your paper, you would still be given credit, although there was no thesis line, you would still be given credit for that argument. This year, I'm suggesting, and it's been suggested to me in my AP training, to ask students to write explicit thesis statements. So make it very, very clear, really up top, really in the first paragraph, to be very clear and precise and explicit and direct in saying what you will be arguing. So in this case, your thesis statement has to be defensible. It has to address the prompt, whatever the rhetorical analysis prompt is asking you to address. For example, the YouTube videos that AP put out focused on Abigail Adams' letter to her son, John Quincy Adams, and it asked to write about the value of experience and her message in regards to the value of experience in the letter to her son. So it will give you some sort of prompt to address, but the other directions are pretty much usually the same every year, and it's asking you to address the way the writer of the text made rhetorical choices and stylistic choices to convey a message to the reader. So to earn that 1-point thesis, you need an explicit, clear, defensible thesis. And this includes logical reasoning. So you can't just say the writer did this, you have to say why the writer did it. So think about it in terms of cause and effect. Row 2 asks you to provide evidence and commentary. So let's look at the 4-point row. The 4 points is asking the writer of the essay to provide specific evidence to support all claims in a line of reasoning, and commentary consistently explains how the evidence supports a line of reasoning and explains how multiple rhetorical choices in the passage contribute to the writer's argument, purpose, or message. Okay, so that's pretty loaded. So let's take it from the top. The first point that you need to earn in the evidence row is provide specific evidence to support all claims in a line of reasoning. Now, line of reasoning is new for AP Language this year. It's basically how a writer structures his argument with evidence and explanation to support all the claims. So your main claim is your thesis, and then all subclaims need to have their own evidence and their own explanation, and it all has to be structured logically so that the reader of your essay can follow your train of thought or your line of reasoning. So the first point is evidence. The second point in this row is commentary. So the writer here consistently explains how the evidence that they have chosen, the precise select evidence they have chosen, supports a line of reasoning. So the evidence has to match up with what you're trying to prove in any specific part of your essay. And then lastly, explains how multiple rhetorical strategies, obviously not just one, but the strongest strategies that the writer of the text has used in the passage contribute to the writer's argument, purpose, or message. So you're going back to the idea of space cat, right? Speaker, purpose, audience, context, and exigence. And then including the cat part of it, the choices, appeals, and tone, that the writer has used to convey all of the different parts of the space. So you are putting together evidence and commentary that supports your thesis that you have established in row 1. All right, let's look for row 3 or row C, the 1 point for sophistication. So the sophistication point is going to be elusive for many writers, and I'm hoping that this clarifies what you need to do. You need to demonstrate what's called sophistication of thought. You have to contextualize your response or your analysis of the text that you have read in the bigger picture. So you have to situate the text that you are analyzing within the bigger picture. Say what is happening in the time period. Say what has happened before. Say what you know about the writer from the context given in the italicized part of the prompt at the top of the page. You're articulating a nuanced perspective. So you are thinking about why the writer made these choices to an intended audience. What could possibly a secondary audience think about those choices, and how would they react to those choices? You are seeing the multiple layers and multiple perspectives in this argument, not looking at it just on the surface. And you are employing a style that is consistently vivid and persuasive. So I'm sure your teachers taught you, some strategies to use to outline, or some formats to use. In the first paragraph you do this, in the second paragraph you do this, and that's great. But you want to also employ your own voice. So AP language exam readers like to see that you have your own unique voice and that you're not sounding like you just worked off a template. So that includes variety of diction, variety of syntax, sophisticated approaches to punctuation, sophisticated use of language. You don't repeat the same words. You don't sound very basic. After all, this is a college writing and reading class, and they're expecting you to sound as if you've been trained to write like you are in college, of course, at the high school level. So the 3-point rubric, just to recap, the first row is the thesis. You will earn 1 point by writing a clear and defensible thesis that addresses the prompt without repeating it. You are including logical reasoning, so you're not just making a blanket statement. You are saying, so what? Or you are answering why and how. Row 2, for the evidence and commentary, to earn the 4 points, you are providing specific evidence that supports your thesis and every single other claim that you make. You are not really addressing a counterclaim in this piece because it's not a traditional argument in that sense, but you are acknowledging that there are different choices that the writer of the text has made, and you are explaining and providing evidence for those choices and completely and thoroughly thinking out loud in terms of why those choices contributed to a successful conveyance of the writer's message. And lastly, for row 3 or row C, sophistication, you are demonstrating that sophistication of thought that is expected of a person who has mastered skills in AP language. You are contextualizing the essay. You are giving background information. You are explaining the currency and the exigence of the writing of the piece by employing anything that you know about the writer, from the italicized information at the top to things that you know about the writer or the time period from history class or science class or your English classes or wherever, your personal experience and observation, film that you watch, as long as it's real and true. You are articulating a nuanced perspective, so you're looking at it through multiple lenses. You are showing that you have the complexity of thought to not just look at the surface. And you have an especially convincing prose style. You don't sound robotic. You have thought out diction and syntax. Of course, it's a timed essay, but you have practiced enough with higher level writing strategies and the use of varied syntax and diction, and you have read over your piece. Give yourself a few minutes to edit and revise, and you have carefully selected the language that conveys exactly what you mean. Remember, the reader of your essay will not be able to come to you later and ask you, what did you mean? Right? You have to say exactly what you want the reader to understand is exactly what you write. I tell my students that I'd rather that they be direct than they be fluffy with their language. I hope this helped you understand the 6-point analytic rubric for the rhetorical analysis essay. In later videos, we will go over how to write an effective introduction using the space cat strategy. Until next time.